Okay, so we painted up this interior part, as you can see him in there. So that's pretty good. So from the outside, bit of glare there, you can see it's all in there. So now we want to put this one in. So again, we've fixed in this lower half as we did before, no problem at all. We've got those ones in. Okay, and the top half, as you can see, a little bit gappy each side, but actually, if you do a little bit of manipulation, and this is one of those things, it's very hard to show you because it just tends to click and suddenly work. Those little squares we spoke about, very important, because if they don't sit in correctly, when you actually come to put this thing together like this, as you can see now, we are completely seamless. Any point it's not quite working, that's because those feet aren't in position. Now, to be honest, I was test fitting this before and I couldn't get it to line up, and I took it out, I put it in, spent around about 10 minutes really jiggling around, playing with it, trying to get it in the right angles. All of a sudden, you hear a click and it all drops into place. So my advice would be twofold. Either do what I did and play for it with a while until you literally get there, or your other option, of course, is to literally just take a little bit of those bottom plates we spoke about that are actually on the fuselage, which make up the actual formers coming up, okay? Nick out the corners so they will go in there with a gap, and that enables you to sort of stable in a little bit and make it a lot more stable as you go through. So as you can see, a couple of rubber bands, and we have got a totally seamless join down here, which is absolutely joyful compared to what I was thinking we were going to have. Now, it's not perfect, not by a long way, but quite frankly, it's the best I think we're going to get. So what I'm going to do is, I'm going to start with a drop of extra thin, and all we're going to do is just going to come in, okay, generous amount of it, and we're just going to drop it in to start the weld action going. Okay, just to get it all in there a little bit and to see really what we've got. Okay, how much of a gap is there? Is it going to need much more of this? Is it going to get away with it? And all these little things. Okay, so this is just for the moment, just to see what's happening to pop it down. Now, usual thing, I'm going to work with the top half first. The reason for doing the top half first, really simple, is it's going to be our show area. It's where you're going to see the most of. So if that's correct, underside we can play with a little bit more and jiggle around. If it's not perfect, it doesn't matter. This does, okay? So what we're going to do now is just going to work it in there a little bit, and I'm looking to see how this is all coming together and what needs pushing down, what needs pulling up slightly, okay, just to give us a better fit. And I have to say, it is amazingly good. I'm so chuffed with the way this is, and to be honest, in testing it was never that good at all. Okay, so we're going to do exactly the same on the other side now. So we're just coming in, placing these all around absolutely everywhere. So just flood it pretty much. Now we have got our thicker glue we used before, but it's not exactly brilliant as the extra thin. All right, so we're just going to take our time. At the moment, we're just, as you can see, tap and flow. We're trying to let the capillary action do most of the work and flow around and get it in. Now once that's in, again, we can just have a little push and a nudge. And again, really happy with that. Now I'm going to use the slightly thicker glue now. So this is just the normal Tamiya cement. Knock a little bit off because this one's a little bit more gappy. So we're just going to come along, we're just going to brush a little bit down in. Alright, because what we're going to do is just sand this up, but it is quite a big gap. Okay, happy of how that is. Again, it will dry quite nicely down there once it gets going. Okay. Alright, so what we're going to do now is leave that to literally dry. Okay, get a nice grip. Remember, this stuff does not dry as quick as the extra thin, so don't think half an hour later you can grab it. It's a little bit softer purely because it's thicker, but that actually is, we're not having to want to touch it too much, a very nice fit. Exactly the same time we can put on the tail planes now, we can get them fixed on. You might as well put the rudder system in and everything else. The only thing I haven't put on yet is the bars, the actual activator bars, things like that. I'm going to put them afterwards once it's all together and we're happy, just in case we've got to get in there with any sanding, filling, gluing, all those things, because otherwise it's just going to get in the way. All right. Then after that, once this is completely together and it's solid, we can think about getting the wingtips put on, or the outer portions of the wings, get them installed to really give us our heinkel shape. Okay, so there we go. That's our very nice looking or hopefully very nice looking. Nicely seamed as well. It's not too many. Got a little bit of a join just down in this one down here, which perhaps we'd like to do somewhat of a little bit of a better job down there. This side, if we're honest, absolutely fantastic. Got no problem with that one at all. Looking pretty good all over. I've used a little bit of filler with a little bit of black paint in it, just so we can see it's going on just around this edge, because it's a tiny little bit gappy. All right, so all we've done is put in a little bit of filler around there just to see how that's laying, how it's all going together. So at the moment, we're quite happy to push on. So what we've actually done, tailplanes are put on. To be honest, it was just a case of getting them the right and level and everything else. So I used a couple of sanding sponges, jacked up, put it in, and then glued it and left it. Flipped it over, did the underside once we were done. The actual horizontal stabilizer is on as well, all nicely fixed in. It's all square, everything's together, turning into a right little lump. Now, we also put those, as we spoke about, the ailerons onto the wings. So now we can actually think about trying to put those on. Now the big thing with these is, again, we're going to look for the better side to be the top side and coming down. Your usual problem is when you have a situation like on your wings like we've got here, is where you get the step between these two. Now this isn't so much of a problem with this kit, which is one of the nice things about it, because you've got little tabs coming along. What this actually enables it to do is to fix onto, if we flip the right wing to the right side, which is that one, no, which is definitely this one. You can actually see just down in here, we've got these tabs running along here as well. Now these tabs enable us to literally lock it together and bring them in one. So what you can do is, as a test fit, pop it in, and as you can see like that, is pretty much spot on. Okay, so we're really happy with how that is. So what we're going to do is going to work it and just to see how it goes. Now, if you're in a situation where you end up with a gap and things like that, chances are it's not lining up totally with one of these tabs. So what I would recommend is picking it up, popping it in, flipping it over, and literally just giving it a wiggle and a work until it fixes in. But have a look underneath, because you might be able to see there we've got a huge gap. That's because these bits haven't locked in as well. So when you do it, sometimes you get a bit of a rocking. So make sure you've got both halves in perfectly before you attempt to put any glue. But as you can see, it's not going to need any glue or filler or anything else. Now it's pretty good on both sides. We're quite happy with this inside. Got a little bit of a gap, but nothing more. But if you get it wrong, it's going to come back and bite you, purely because you're going to have to then come into the situation of going in and adding bits and pieces to get it all in. Okay, a couple of things you can do to help out with this particular joint. It's big. One is a slower acting glue, so we spoke about it before. It's using something like normal Tamiya cement, which is more traditional thin glue, rather than a hot action thin glue, because obviously it dries so very quickly doing it. The other thing as well is use super glue to tack it into place before you come in and then try and actually do a big glue joint. That way it holds it in place. Then you come in with your normal glues after it's held there, put them round, they do all the work and give you all the strength to glue it all together. Personal choice, however you want to do it, okay? For my choice, what I'm going to go with, if I've got the right glue, I'm just going to come in, get the top off, I'm just going to come in and literally just going to pop in a couple of taps of glue. Now I'm not going overboard because I don't want much to happen in here, because you don't want the situation where you put this in and it squeezes and goes out. What we're trying to do is just hopefully give us a better seal. So we're just going to give it a wiggle and everything. And as I say, it's not the easiest thing to hold on to. Just making sure the top and bottom are in there together, because if you've got one that is and one that's not, you're going to have problems. Okay, so that's got both. Okay, and we're just carefully switching our position now. Okay, so we're just going to have a look. We want to see how it's coming together and everything else. Okay, so what we're going to do is literally just going to hold it for a moment, just until the glue starts to bite. Okay, so we're happy of how both sides are. Okay, so what I'm going to do is, I'm just going to bring this down and then I'm going to grab some sponges. And we're just going to try and see if we can find a happy medium to get this to lift up and seal on the bottom as well. I don't know quite the best way to do this. Okay, because what we want to do is push this two halves together, so we've got very little seal. Now we're going to check the underside to make sure that's not too bad down there. Happy of how that is. So what we're going to do is going to come in with the medium type glue, and again we're just going to touch and let it flow a little bit, some glue. Alright, now we're going to hopefully brush those in so you don't end up with big glue marks on there. Okay, now what we're going to do is come along with some extra thin, and what this enables us to do is tidy up what we've got. Now I know the angle isn't perfect on this, but hopefully it'll do. But you can actually get rid of the glue marks you've made by brushing over them now with the extra thin and taking care of any joins and seams as you go on. Okay, now what we're going to have to do here is somewhat give this a nudge and a squeeze because we want it all to balance in. So I'm just pushing down the rear because I want to better fix down the back. I'm checking the underside to see what that's like. Okay, not too bad at all. So what I'm trying to do in this particular instance is not take the weight off the wing and pull it up just to make a good seam line, because we need a balance. Now there is a small gap underneath, but it's nothing massive. I don't think it's going to be too much of a problem. So what I'm going to do is add a little bit more glue just down in here. Okay, so we've got a bit of a gap. As this starts to go off and starts to bite, what we're going to do is refill this gap up again. So it gives us basically a panel line that's sealed. And then the theory is we'll be able to release this, slightly push it down so it will pull, expand, and it will take care of the gap at the bottom. But this is our important gap at the top, so obviously this is where our attention is focused, because as we said before with all of these seams, this is the important one. And at the moment, as you might be able to see, I know it's not the best angle in the world, it's not too bad at all. But just looking generally at it, it's going to weld up very nicely and probably be in scale with these other panel lines, which is something we're after. So what I'm going to do, leave this one for about 10 minutes, start to go off, start to get enough bite so when you pull it, it doesn't pull apart and all things like that. And what we can do is flip it over, have a look at the underside, make sure that, you know, obviously there's no glue tapping out and dripping through and everything else. If we're happy with it, we can glue up the underside. Then what we're going to do is literally place this down and get the other wing so that they're both at the same angles, because obviously we don't want one wing up and one down and all the rest of it, and try and recreate obviously the high angle shape and look and everything else without too much messing around with the geometries of how the wings are. Okay, what a complete monster. As you can see, good job we got the wide angled lenses out today. This thing is massive. It really, you don't appreciate how big this thing is until you actually get to this point, because let's face it, this thing is as long as my arm, okay? It is a monster kit, so you're going to need a little bit of room to get it round. Okay, so let's talk about what we've done. Obviously, we went for the better seal up here on the top, and then we've put the top one in as well. And really, we've just gone around and put in a little bit of filler, okay, around here. Again, this is my new sort of plastic weld type technique, and I've just added a little bit of black to it so I can see it a little bit easier on grey, so we can see what's going on. On the underside, as you can see, this mammoth down here, we've gone along and we've just taken care of all these seams to put them in. Twofold reason for doing this one. One, it's very large. When we're talking large, we're talking weight. As we know, there's no real sort of, you know, major spinage in this one, okay, or any sort of cross beams coming across and formers and things like that. They do tend to be touching as they are. By using the glue that we've used, and then obviously coming in with a liquid styrene, you know, a melted down styrene to put this in, it makes it a lot stronger than traditionally of using fillers and stuff like that, because there is a lot of weight dealing with this. So there we go, that's those in. So what we're going to do now is really go around and tidy all of this up. Just be mindful of these windows. It's a good job that we've still got open in here, so if we needed to, we could get underneath and we could get to the windows if needed. We can dust them off, all those areas like that. But technically this top piece is supposed to be like a loose fit, and I really just don't get that idea from it. It's not the best seam all the way around, and the detail isn't exactly brilliant. So from our point of view, we're going in. I'm glad we haven't messed around too much with these Bombays, because quite frankly they're not exactly brilliant, and we can put the actual covers on them to take care of them like that. So from our point of view, what we're going to do is just work on these. Two options. Okay, your first option is to obviously just come in with your traditional sander. I would highly recommend using skinny type sanders rather than your bigger ones. So we've got a fine one here and going in. Now the idea for using these rather than the small or the larger ones is we're not going to destroy too much detail as we go round with this. So we've got a little bit of a step going on here. I am so worried about that tail wheel because I'm just waiting for it to fall off at any point. Okay, so we've got a small little step down here in the back which I couldn't really do much with, but we're just going to run with it because we're going to pop a panel line in to hopefully disguise a lot of this joining. Now this has been drying overnight. You want to make sure that it is completely dry before you're sort of coming in here doing this type of work to it. Alright, so we can literally just go over with this one and we're just sanding. Again, usual thing, we're letting the sander do 90% of the work, so you're not really pushing down and dragging it in, you're just dragging it over, and we're feeling now, and we're not feeling too bad at all. Okay, so what we're going to do, we can just come over the front. Okay. And all we're going to do is literally get this into a point where we're happy, and then we can start thinking about if it's going to need perhaps a second coat. Have we got any little drops or dips and things in there? But you can probably see on there that's not too bad at all. Okay, it's actually a very nice joint. This front one as well, we can probably just come in with a something like a skinny sponge in here. Okay, so we've got the medium skinny sponge just to sort of cut into this a little bit, just to see what we've actually got along this entire wing section. Okay, and to see how it's looking. Okay, and again, really, really nice. No real problems with any of that at all down there, which is quite something. That's looking good as well. So if we just flip it over, we can have a look on the other side and see what we're going to do with this again. So we're just going to come in with a medium. Okay. And again, that's actually not too bad. There is a little bit of a step here, we're going to be honest, alright? There is a little bit of a step, but it's what gave us the best on top, okay? So, usual thing is, we can just keep going along, just sanding this in a little bit. Okay, get a little bit more stick as we go over it. No pun intended. Okay. Okay. And there we go, and actually that's not too bad, and I think by the time we come in and we put a panel line in there, that will do really, really well. The other option you've got is to use lacquer thinners and physically melt the plastic and everything down in one, okay, which is something we can show here. So I'm just going to grab a couple of cotton buds, good quality ones, don't use the cheap ones, otherwise you're going to have a real problem. Now we'll do it somewhere where it's not going to matter too much, he says, hoping. Alright, so what we're going to do, we'll pick out a little area just here. I'm just going to adjust the setting on this, okay, so I can get a better camera angle on this one so I can see what you're seeing as we come in. Alright, so this is lacquer thinners. So from our point of view, I'm using Mr. Colour or Mr. Hobby, Mr. Colour self-leveling thinners. Okay, it's a lacquer thinners. It's not going to work with enamels or anything else like that. You are going to need something like this. And then all we're going to do, place it down, alright, and then you're just going to gently wipe over. Now what happens to start with, nothing really happens, alright, and then this will start to eat into the joint. Okay, now this is quite a nice way of doing it. As long as you keep it all wet and smooth, it will give you a very nice smooth way of doing this, all right? But it takes a little bit to get going because obviously what it's actually doing is remelting plastic back down again. Okay, and this is one of those things, we're just going to pick in an area just here and we're just going to keep at it until it starts to shrink in, all right? So we're happy with how that is. We're just going to come in a little bit more, all the way down. But this will actually start to eat into the area. So it's starting to go now. I feel it starting to pull. Okay, and this will give you quite a clean. But what happens is, as soon as we start to melt this plastic and it starts to go, you might notice the Q-tip starting to change colour a bit now, is that it's actually going to start to melt the plastic around it as well as your bit. So you might see now it's starting to eat just down this area here. It's a long old process, but it gives you a nice effect, and it just depends if you have got the time to sit and do it. Alright, so we're just going to go on here. Okay, you might, well, hopefully you can see it's starting to shrink back. I can see it starting to go along this area here and everything else. To speed this up, the way I would recommend doing it is something like we've done here. Now, we've already done this side here. Perhaps you've got a little bit of damage caused and things like that. What you can actually do then is come along with this stuff and go over it. This will polish out and smooth out any little imperfections in this seam. So if we just work this rear area down here, you can see now how neat and tidy this is becoming as we're working our way down here. Also, it'll melt any scratches together. It'll take care of anything you've done where you might have destroyed it via sanding. Okay, so we're just going to grab a little bit more. As I said, it's one of those things, it's a time thing. It does it when it's ready rather than when you want it, as you can imagine with all these things. Okay, so we're just going to keep it going just for a moment, just to smooth it out and polish. And obviously what happens is you're still going to get little blemishes down here, but it should make a far smoother, smarter type finish. Okay, so we're just going to finish right there, rub all that away, and there we go. Without going into some polishing, hopefully you can see, actually get the glare of the light, you can see it hasn't damaged anything around this area really at all. But what you've actually got now is a very nice smooth finish right the way over. So obviously you could do it on something like on here. So on this back ones, if you're coming in with, like, to be honest, quite a coarse file, okay, just to take some chunks out, just speed this process up a bit. Got a nice coarse file here. And remember, when you're filling, you're not trying to take it all away, you're just trying to do it until it's all completely smooth. So don't think you need to get rid of all this dark colour, because obviously you want it to remain, because it could be filling an important area. Okay, but the idea with this is you can see the darkness between the two. Pop that over. Okay, so that is nice and smooth down there. Then you would take these, okay, and you can just pop around and see exactly what's going on with them absolutely everywhere on your model as you're popping your way around, okay? And obviously it will smooth it out. Then you can come in with your polishers and all your bits and pieces. So what I've got to do now is quite a mammoth job. We've got to do a little bit down this wing root area. I'm going to move that before we knock it flying. We're going to pop in and we're going to put a little few of them all down these areas down here. We've got obviously this one big section down here, a little bit on the tail still to do, and then obviously just clean up the wing roots and these outer spars and everything else like that. But already hopefully you can see it's actually not looking too bad. It's going to be okay. It's going to come together quite nicely. We can pop a panel line in there, just re-rivet where it's needed, things like that, and we can disguise all of these joins and everything else like that. So we're going to take care of the entire overall now, take care of all the seams, rescribing, any bits and pieces, blemishes, fingerprints, all those areas. So we've got all the hard work down, the dusty, the nasty work. We can give it a wipe over, get all the dust out of here, everything else like that, and we can start thinking about putting the glass work in, all the different glass areas, everything else like that, getting them masked up before we can move on with painting.